for 2021 and doing that with plenty of time to get you ready for your draft. So let's bring the man of the hour in. Mr. Sofka, how are we doing?
I'm doing wonderful, Dan. How are you?
Doing well, man. I'm enjoying life, having some fun here. Appreciate you hanging out with us on the live line per always. And the fact that we have the opportunity to, talk about a lot of things here and when it comes to fantasy football all throughout the year, just to, to bring that point home a little bit more as well. Just what you can say about the fact that, you and I are dedicated to fantasy football advice all throughout the entire year, and just the importance of that in your opinion.
Well, it comes down to your approach, and I find that for me, it's an approach that I try to take on everything I do in life, and that's, you set out to do what you want to do, and you do it. Nike had the thing a few years ago, just do it. There's a potential in anything you have great interest in. It's just a matter of how much time, how much effort you're willing to put in. Well, this is what I do. This is what I enjoy doing. And this is what I do. I mean, so it's empowering to be on top of whatever you're doing. It feels good. It feels good to win. Fantasy football is fun. It's a great activity, but it's a lot more fun when you win. It's like anything else in life. So you're going to get out of it what you put into it. Now, maybe you don't have a lot of time or you don't know where to go. Well, I'll point you in the right direction, and I'll even do a lot of the legwork. So for sure, check us out at the Facebook group, Winning Fantasy Football, and you can always follow up with me at HallOfFameFantasyFootball.com. But this is a great. I'm so happy that we're talking about sleepers here, simply because there's a lot of sleepers to consider when you consider a lot of rookies last year didn't get the full camps, didn't get the full opportunity to blossom because of the restrictions. Now, I know the restrictions were basically the same for everyone, but that's what's so great. Christmas may come twice this year. We may get this draft, and that's coming off an abbreviated college season where some guys didn't play. They opted out. Yeah. So, I mean, there's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of excitement. It's almost like waking up to two Christmases with the draft coming up here, and then you got to consider these rookies who are going to blossom into wonderful NFL players for your fantasy team.
Yeah, and the fact that we get to, like you said, I mean, the fact that we're in a unique place where, if players did play, it was an abbreviated season in college. So, they kind of essentially banked more time potentially for their career. If they didn't play, they banked more time for the guys that were trying to make teams that were coming in as undrafted rookies, like a James Robinson and whatnot. Some of those guys are still out there. Some guys like Mo Neal from Syracuse at running back, still looking for opportunities. So there's all of that going on. Pro days are going to be a part of that as well. And then on top of all of that, we have, the fact that some of these guys that did get time were, used not as much as maybe some of the vets. So there's a lot to say about the young guns that are in here and, some guys that have been around the block that could be sleepers as well. So, Mike, I want to start with quarterbacks. Who do you consider to be to be your sleeper quarterbacks? You can go down the line. I'll go down mine as well. So I'll open it up to you on who you believe is a fantasy football sleeper quarterback for 2021.
Yeah, it's a little bit hard and dicey at the quarterback position because there's still some moving parts out there. And most notably, that's Deshaun Watson and Russell Wilson. What's going to happen with Russell Wilson? Is Seattle going to move on? Is this the breaking point there? And the same thing goes for, what's going to happen with Deshaun Watson. He's gone on and demanded several times a trade, and Houston is saying no, they're not going to trade. So, hang on one second here. Sorry. Oh, I apologize.
You're okay.
So there are a lot of moving parts. You got a lot of opportunities as well. For instance, Washington. Alex Smith is probably gone. Kyle Allen's heading to free agency. Is it going to be Taylor Heineke? Is that going to be a sleeper quarterback, or are they going to bring in a Russell Wilson? They're going to bring in a Deshaun Watson. You take a look at another moving part in the league. Maybe this is the fresh start that this guy needs in Carson Wentz. I mean, he's not a bad quarterback, but he's just not one of the top 32 right now, in my opinion. But, he's going to have a fresh start behind a decent offensive line with a good rookie running back, with a great former quarterback, Frank Reich, as a coach there. He could possibly resurrect this guy's career from where he is right now, because it's been a lot of negative, a lot of injuries. But don't take anything away from the guy. He was a top 2 pick a few years ago, and I still think there's some quarterback play in him. I could go into a Baker Mayfield type situation, or a Joe Burrow, whose rookie season was ended abruptly with the injury, but the guys I like are probably still out there, probably still in limbo, because we don't know. Now, let's say you look at the Carson Wentz situation. Well, who did they draft last year? They drafted a quarterback in Jacob Eason in Indianapolis. Now, I would have thought that maybe this cat would have gotten a chance by now. Jacoby Brissett wasn't the guy. But you take a look at Carson Wentz is going to have the opportunity to be the leader unquestionably about this league. So I think he has the most upside because of the parts around him. The Taylor Heineke thing, he's still a real young quarterback. I don't know that that's going to happen. I think they're going to bring someone else in from the outside. But it's going to be something we're going to get to talk about from now until, almost training camp here with the moving parts. So I'm looking forward to it. But right now, I would go with those 2 guys, Carson Wentz and maybe a Taylor Heineke.
Yeah, for me, I would say, fantasy sleepers. I mean, obviously, we have to see what happens with Russell Wilson and Deshaun Watson. Wouldn't it be interesting if they flip spots? If Deshaun and if Houston and Seattle could figure something out, and Seattle says, we'll take Deshaun, you take Russell, and see what that could be. But, I think, my sleepers really come down to, I would say, Carson Wentz as well. Again, he was a number 2 pick out of North Dakota. So there's the reality that he wasn't a sleeper back then. He helped the team get to their way to the Super Bowl a few years back and then wasn't able to play in it. Nick Foles was able to come in and close and finish. But I think that Carson Wentz resurrecting a career, Frank Reich, who is with Philadelphia, who's now the head coach of the Colts for, last little bit here. I think that, he's a sleeper because some people are probably going to drop at him. Now, some Eagles fans are going to pick him up. Some people that, think that Carson Wentz is supposed to be good in general based on that high draft pick that he got a few years ago will pick him up. But some people are going to kind of wave him by. And so I think that puts him as a sleeper. I think Joe Burrow is a sleeper as well. He did some really good things for me. I picked him up as a backup quarterback. He had some tremendous weeks before he went out with an injury. So I think that he's somebody to look to. I would say Justin Herbert as well as a rookie. I think some people might go higher on him, but the Josh Allens and the Tom Bradys and the Mahomes and the Aaron Rodgers, they're still going to get picked up. People are still going to move on them. But I think, you could say Matt Stafford's a sleeper in L.A. You could say Jared Goff is a sleeper in Detroit. So, those are all names that I think make things interesting. I think Daniel Jones is a sleeper with the Giants because people still don't know what to expect from him. So I think that when people are going out and getting the Lamar Jacksons and the Tom Brady's and the Mahomes and the Watsons and the Wilsons, wherever they end up, in the Allens and the Rodgers of the world, that you should also be considering the Herberts and the Burrows and the Wentzes and the Joneses of the world as well. Because someone's going to pick up Big Ben before they pick up Daniel Jones, arguably, in some of these drafts that we have. And these are names that you really need to focus on and kind of zero in on and give a chance to. So those would be my fantasy quarterback sleepers. Mike, what do you have for running back? I know that this list is probably tremendous, but that's why we're here. So what do you have running back-wise for sleepers this season?
Well, the running back situation is something that is beauty is in the eye of the beholder.
Yeah.
Okay? The NFL has come out with this notion, or at least it's through their actions, that the running back position is somewhat disposable. And it is. There are some one-offs, a la Derrick Henry, the beast right now. But again, you got to look at the rookie guys from last year. You want a fun activity? Go to NFL.com. Go to the draft. Pull up the draft and look through the draft. 6 of the first 32 guys were offensive linemen. So that means there's a lot of linemen that didn't get all the reps they needed either. And a lot of these guys are tackles, best at their position. Jedrick Willis, Mekhi Benton, Andrew Thomas, names like this, that Isaiah Wilson. These guys are going to need time, and that's pivotal for the running back position. A lot of teams are like, oh, we'll just we're getting away from the run. It's a passing game. No, you still need to run the ball, and your running back needs to know how to pass block. That's key. In the NFL, if you're not pass blocking, you're not on the field. So with those things in mind, you got to take a look at guys who are going to be able to take it to the next level. Are we talking about a DeAndre Swift who's going to be able to catch the ball out of the backfield now from a Jared Goff more so than he had in the past with Matt Stafford? You take a look at his speed and athleticism and the opportunity to play with AP. I couldn't imagine where this guy's head and heart was all year, but I think this guy's going to continue on. He's going to be able to catch 80% of his targets, so he's definitely a PPR guy. I would think that he could be a top running back, a top 10 running back without fail in the fantasy season next year. Then I'm looking at the situation around another player. I'm talking about DJ Dallas from Seattle. DJ Dallas, I mean, you look at the running back situation in Seattle, Chris Carson's probably gone. He's had an injury-plagued career so far. Carlos Hyde's 158 years old. So, I mean, I know Rashad Penny's still around, but I think a DJ Dallas, maybe a Travis Homer, those are a couple names you want to just keep in your mind, because I look at opportunities. I not only look at the player, but I look at the opportunity around him. Another great opportunity at running back possibly is A.J. Dillon. Well, Aaron Jones, he's probably going to get more money. He'll probably end up in Miami or somewhere with a bigger contract. He's going to have to take a cut deal if he wants to stay in Green Bay. And I don't think so Green Bay tops the chart in where your opportunity is as a running back, where your running attempts are. There's over 340 running back attempts up for grabs next year as of this moment. Who's going to take them? I don't think they're going to be able to bring Aaron Jones back. I don't know if they want to bring Jamal Williams back, but I would think that would be the guy that gets brought back. So I think the future's bright for A.J. Dillon in Green Bay. So as the parts continue to move on different teams, it's going to affect different players. So it's going to have a ripple effect. So, yeah, again, I like this time of year because it's fluid normally, but at the same time, we got those last year players to evaluate. So, again, it's like Christmas twice this year.
Yeah, and I think for me, kind of taking a look at this and who I would put out there as fantasy sleepers for this upcoming season for 2021. For me, I agree with you on A.J. Dillon. I covered him when he was at Boston College. I watched him, spoke with Steve Adazio about him a lot. I'm a big fan of A.J. Dillon, and I think that, he's definitely a guy. I thought that maybe he would have a little. I was hoping again. I was hoping that the high draft pick they spent on him in the second round meant that they were going to play him more. The Jamal Williams, Aaron Jones thing just doesn't work. Aaron Jones has proven that he can work, but Jamal Williams not so much. So A.J. Dillon being able to take over, even if Jamal stays. I mean, obviously they had Ty Montgomery there for a bit, and he went. So I think A.J. Dillon is someone to look at. I went a little bit. I kind of went quick on him because I know that he's talented, and I know that, I believe in him to have a good NFL career, but I think here in year number 2, he's definitely a sleeper. I think Ronald Jones II is a sleeper. If he stays around in Tampa, I think that this is a guy who's a sleeper as well, because of the fact that now that he has Tom Brady, it looked like his stats were better, Leonard Fournette's were better. Fournette, you can put in this boat as well, but I think if Fournette comes back, they'll think he's more the dominant guy, which I think makes Ronald Jones II a sleeper. Antonio Gibson, I have him too, coming to us a lot of running backs coming out of Memphis that have done good things in the NFL in recent history come in here on the Washington football team. I like Antonio Gibson. They're trying to figure out their quarterback situation, what their future is going to be, and Antonio Gibson's going to be somebody that whoever that quarterback is, they're going to lean on. So I have him circled on my list as well as a sleeper. And then, I would say outside of that, some of these guys, I think of Mike Davis in Carolina. I think of Mike Davis, where he ends up or what happens with him. He's an insurance policy for Christian McCaffrey, and we've seen that a lot of people rush to get him during the season. I would still put, and I would kind of put, I guess, all these guys to an extent in here, but Darrell Henderson Jr., as well as Cam Akers and Malcolm Brown. I'd have to put them all in here from the Rams of this past season because of the fact that, the Rams are still trying to figure out what life is going to look like over there. So I'd put that there as well. And outside of that, a sleeper guy, I don't think he should be considered a sleeper in my book, but I think a lot of people are going to pass on him because his stats weren't good as a rookie, is Zach Moss out of Buffalo. You and I hyped him up, Mike. We talked a lot about him recently here, but I think some people might dip on him, so good for us. And then the other one that I would mention is another guy who came out of Memphis, who I covered there, is Tony Pollard. Because we've seen that Zeke, really, without Dak, Zeke wasn't looking Zeke-esque, and Tony Pollard was getting some touches here and doing some things. And then, I'd throw another one in, Alexander Madison from Minnesota. So I think there's a lot to look at when it comes to running backs. Again, A.J. Dillon, Ronald Jones II, Antonio Gibson, Mike Davis, Darrell Henderson, Cam Akers, Malcolm Brown. Figuring out that situation, Darrell Henderson would probably be the sleeper if they're all there. And then Zach Moss, Tony Pollard, and Alexander Madison are the guys that I would really tell you to look at in the grand scheme of things. And just to make some weird notes, Daniel Jones and Josh Allen as quarterbacks had better rushing statistics than Malcolm Brown, Giovanni Bernard, Nyheim Hines, Boston Scott, Benny Snell, and Leonard Fournette when it comes to total yards. Just so you know, I thought it was a weird stat to have. So we'll take a step aside for a fast break. When Mike and I come back, we will be discussing the fantasy wide receiver sleepers as well as the tight ends. We had a message that came in. Gibson will be a top target in the drafts next season. He won't fly under the radar much. So Greg's saying he doesn't think Antonio Gibson will dip. I think some people will overlook Washington as a team and the quarterback situation being up in the air. That's why I think that some people might pass on Antonio Gibson. But I get your point that he was a bright spot on the team, maybe the brightest spot. And and then he said Cam Akers emerged as well, but Cam got hurt and Cam went up and down as a rookie. So I still think that Cam Akers will not be one of the top ones off the board. But, where we put these sleepers, I would say Cam is more, like I said, if Cam and Darrell Henderson are both there, then Darrell Henderson's a sleeper. So that's the reality of it all. Cam will be there because he's under a rookie contract, but Darrell Henderson and Malcolm Brown, what they want to do with them with the Rams will be interesting to see. I would imagine that they would keep one of them at least at this point. So with that being said, Mike and I will take a step aside for a fast break. When we come back, we will be discussing with you wide receivers and tight ends that are sleepers this upcoming season. In these unique times, there are those in our community that give us a sense of normalcy and positivity. Pizza Man on 50 Oswego Street in Baldwinsville has been here for you for over 35 years and is here now. Call 315-638-1234 or order online at pizzamanbville.com to bring those familiar tastes into your home. And remember to come see our monthly on-site broadcasts centered around the community and our Baldwinsville beats. Pizza Man in Baldwinsville. Any way you slice it, they are always here for you.
I'm George Townsend of Honda City with some good advice when buying a new car. The true cost of owning a new car is determined by the appraised value when you trade it. No vehicle appraises higher than a Honda. Next, look for low APRs and deep discounts. You also want low maintenance costs and great fuel economy. That's why my advice to you is to buy a new Honda. Looking pre-owned, visit our Honda Certified Used Car Center. Honda City, 7140 Henry Clay Boulevard, Liverpool, or HondaCity-CNY.com.
It would be a pity if you don't shop at Honda City.
This is Jimmer Sikowski, owner-operator of Chick-fil-A Cicero, 7916 Brewerton Road in Cicero, right in front of the Home Depot. I had a deep feeling that God wanted me to do something bigger with my life and to help people, help others. I kept putting Chick-fil-A in my life, and I realized as I was going through the franchise selection process that positively impacting the lives of others was really core to what we do here at Chick-fil-A. First of all, it starts with the food. The food is brought in fresh daily. We bring in local produce. We prepare to order in the kitchen. We hand bread our chicken. We hand spin our milkshakes. It's great food. It doesn't taste like fast food. I think the second thing is the way people feel when they come in a Chick-fil-A restaurant. It's different. We try to treat people with intentional kindness here, which is very different and deeper than good customer service. And so I think it feels remarkable for most people to come in a Chick-fil-A restaurant. And then lastly, the impact that we try to have in the community is very different. It's a big part of the expectation of every operator of a Chick-fil-A restaurant is that they're actively engaged in their community, they're a leader in the community, and they're making a difference. When they realize that what we're striving to do is to shine a little light in their life, that's a very, very different experience than you will have in any other quick service restaurant. And it's that remarkable experience that I think people will emotionally connect with.
Welcome back here to Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora on wakeupcalldt.com, your one-stop sports shop, and on mixlr.com/wakeupcalldt, hanging out inside of the Cafe Kubal Studios. You're watching us on Facebook live on facebook.com/live-now-DT, and of course on youtube.com/wakeupcalldt. So, hope you're all having yourselves a tremendous morning this morning, as Mike Sofkin and I are breaking down your fantasy sleepers for the upcoming season. And we had our quarterbacks and our running backs. Mr. Sofka, I'll throw it to you for the receiving side of things. We'll start with wide receivers. Who are your sleepers at wide receiver this year?
Yeah, well, there's a little more meat on the bone here in the wide receiver category, and that's, almost the norm because wide receivers tend to take a good 2 to 3 years to develop. In the past few years, that time has been shortened. Randy Moss back in the day broke that mold. So you always looked at guys that were 2 to 3 year players for your team to be breakouts or sleeper guys. They're, again, not to underestimate what happened last year. These are guys that are going to be the sleepers, and they're top on the list. You look at a guy like Jalen Reagor. Jalen Reagor's got speed. But, he wasn't on the field all year. So I understand dinged up and so forth. I get it. And he had Carson Wentz and then Jalen Hurts. There's no telling what was going on in Philadelphia there. So I think Jalen Reagor is an underestimated guy. He could be a sleeper guy. And then you take a look at Denzel Mims. Kind of like Reagor, Mims dealt with the injury early on in camp. And I understand with the injuries and the slow uptick on the wide receivers, but I also look at opportunity around a player. Gabriel Davis, for instance, from Buffalo, he had 7 touchdowns on only 62 targets. I think it was right about 600 yards or so, too. They could be possibly in Buffalo moving on from the John Brown situation because of his contract. So, Gabriel Davis has a lot of upside. I look at Antonio Gandy Golden. You look at the quarterback situation in Washington. He could be a steal. When Washington drafted him last year in the 4th round, most people thought they stole him in the 4th round. So, Gandy Golden is a guy that you could look towards. Terry McLaurin's there as well. Steve Sims. You take a look at other situations around the league, though. You take a look at Daryl Mooney. You know, it looks like Allen Robinson could be pretty much done in Chicago, so maybe Mooney is going to have that larger role. I continuing around the league, Jerry Jeudy. When Cortland Sutton comes back, I think it's going to work wonders for Jerry Jeudy, and he had a heck of a rookie campaign. Laviska Shenault, you know, you go a little closer to home in Jacksonville with a potential Trevor Lawrence coming in. And let me tell you something, it's a perfect storm brewing in Jacksonville right now, because who was Urban Meyer's ticket? Who was his first quarterback? His first ticket was Alex Smith. Who was his next one at Florida? Well, that would be Tim Tebow. And then you take a look at who's he possibly have coming in. This is a great situation for Urban Meyer because he can relate better, I think, to the younger college athlete than the older grizzly veteran in the NFL. You take a look at what they have in Jacksonville. They have a dynamic running back right now. They have a situation at receiver where they have some speed, but they have a lot of targets that are unquestioned right now. You know, are we going to see the emergence of a Colin Johnson as well again? So I think Laviska Shenault is definitely an interesting situation there. You could go even deeper to a Tyler Johnson in Tampa Bay. That's going to depend on what Chris Godwin does. You know, are the Bucs able to re-sign him? Are they going to franchise tag him? Yeah. Are they going to be able to bring Antonio Brown back? So with those, you know, it's the situation around the player, and it's the fact that a lot of these players were undervalued because they didn't get the full year. And again, I get it. Nobody had the full year, so it's equal still. But, you know, when you need reps, the NFL is about reps. When you're a lineman, it's about reps. When you're a wide receiver, it's about reps. It's about routes. So I look for these guys, all rookies from last year, basically. I look for those guys to be the sleepers in the wide receiver class.
Yeah, you know, and I think, and Mike bringing that up, you know, for me on the wide receiver side of things, you named a lot of these guys, but, you know, the Jalen Reagors, because of the situation at quarterback in Philadelphia, you know, they went high on him. They believed in him over some other guys. And so I want to see how that pans out. So he's there. Denzel Mims with the Jets and what they're going to do offensively. Darnell Mooney, who did some good things in Chicago that you brought up. I know that some people might disagree with me on this because people saw him in, you know, the championship game. But I still think that he dips below the equator line as McCole Hardman. I think that people, you know, he might be a mid-range guy that someone's going to pick up. But I still think that he's overlooked. He's not a household name yet. And I think that, you know, that could involve, depending on who you're drafting with, because remember your room. You got to remember your room, you know. And so when you're drafting, you know, are you drafting with guys that are doing their research and their due diligence, you know, the men and women out there that are doing that? We have some phenomenal women that have won numerous championships. And ours, we've had some phenomenal men that have won numerous championships. And so, you know, one of mine won't let McCole go, but another one I think may. So he's another guy I kind of put here. And I use the sleeper thing very loosely on him, but I'm just thinking of certain situations. Gabriel Davis, guy out of Buffalo. I agree with you, Mike, on that. You know, I think that there's something to be said there. Laviska Shenault, you know, I think is another guy because he comes in, he's talented. You know, we saw a draft pick in the top 3 rounds by Jacksonville in 2020, taking Laviska Shenault Jr. and putting him onto the squad. So I would agree with you on all of that, you know, these guys really seem to make sense. And then the Hardman factor is because of the focus being on so many other players and because he wasn't as consistent by any means as the Travis Kelce's and the Clyde Edwards-Hilairs as well as the Tyreek Hills. So that's just something to look at, in my opinion, as well. Go ahead.
Well, there's a couple other guys that you could look at that may not be considered sleepers, but they're more towards sleepers than they are top 10 receivers right now. I'm talking, again, look at the draft from last year, and then look at just the first round. There were 6 wide receivers in the first round. Then you look at those positions, again, running backs and wide receivers, there's 12 in the second. So those are the guys that are going to blossom. These guys that didn't perform as well as people wanted them to, because it's the NFL. They had abbreviated season. Henry Ruggs, I don't think he had the year that people thought he could. I don't think that Justin Jefferson, even though he blew up, I don't think he's even reached anywhere near what he can do. You look at a Brandon Ayuk, you look at his situation in San Fran, who's the quarterback? Yeah. What's going on there? So, again, you can do it by round in the NFL, by the draft rounds. T. Higgins, first player off the board in the second round even. So there's a lot of talent that's out there to be unspoken. And a lot of people aren't going to do these deep dives. They're going to do what, most people do, is they brush up just before the draft and they think they got it all. And, you don't. You got to look a little deeper. And there's so much information that you need to give a closer look to. There's no combine this year. So what we're going to be relying more on game film and 40 times from pro days. So that's why the combine is so important. But again, that's going to make next year's sleepers even better as well, the following year, the 2022 season. So look at the draft from last year and go back and look at these position classes, and then look at that player's individual team around him. Yeah. Look at what they're going to do in Philadelphia at quarterback. Look how that's going to affect him. So I am very excited for this preseason. I'm ready to draft right now. Let's go.
Yeah, and I think again, that list, and from everything you just said, I would say that the list of sleepers would include Darnell Mooney, Gabriel Davis, McCole Hardman, Denzel Mims, Jalen Reagor, Laviska Shenault Jr., Henry Ruggs, Brandon Ayuk, and I'd put Hunter Renfrow on there as well from the Vegas Raiders. So there's a lot to look at when it comes to this, and if you circle it, it's kind of like, well, what are they going to do with the Raiders at quarterback? Is Gruden sold on Carr? And then what's going on in San Francisco? They need the depth. And then you look in Jacksonville and say, okay, new quarterback, and so he's obviously going to have his guy or guys. Then you look at Philly, the quarterback situation. You look at the Jets, the quarterback situation. You look at Chicago, the quarterback situation. So all but McCole Hardman and Gabriel Davis, we're looking at that quarterback situation, which turns these guys into sleepers because I think there's talent there, and they could be in a really good opportunity. It could work out swimmingly for them, whoever's brought in, or it could backfire, and hopefully it doesn't do the latter. Mike, speaking of the latter, the final piece that we have for our sleepers in this edition of the Fantasy Football Power Hour, proudly presented by the Wildcat Sports Pub on 3680 Milton Avenue in Camillus, New York. Thoughts on the tight end position and who you have as a sleeper this season?
Yeah, there's two big things that are going to impact the sleepers I have. There's only a couple of them. Where's Hunter Henry going to end up? So he's going to establish a new relationship. You know where I'd like to see him go is the Colts. I think that would be an interesting situation. Or I don't know if he can Philadelphia with a Dallas Goedert there, but Philadelphia may make a move in the draft. So I'll talk about that in just a second here. But let's say he ends up with the Colts. It's a new situation for Carson Wentz. Carson Wentz favors the the tight ends. This could be a perfect situation for Hunter Henry and for Carson Wentz. They're both going to have the same fresh new start. They're both going to have the quarterback as the coach, and that really into something. But you look around, and again, another rookie, another young name, Cole Kmet. Cole Kmet for the Bears. This is something that was quite interesting to me because Jimmy Graham was there. He was kind of doing the Ryan Fitzpatrick to the Tua, in his ear, being there to support him, that veteran guy that doesn't mind taking that step back. Now, Cole Kmet had a pretty good year last year, but Jimmy Graham as well in the red zone, so I think it made both guys better. But, again, it's where opportunity meets the player. You take a look at what the Bears have around. They're probably not going to have Allen Robinson. He's probably going to move on. So who's going to catch the ball? Well, we talked about one of the guys. We talked about Darryl Mooney. Are they going to roll with Darryl Mooney and Anthony Miller and play Tariq Cohen more in the slot there? Yeah. That's going to make a guy like Cole Kmet blossom at tight end. He could be the guy that absolutely nobody sees coming. And another young name, another young face at the tight end position, Adam Troutman. You know, Jared Cook's gone. He was 165 years old for the Saints. But who's going to be the quarterback in New Orleans again? So here's a young, impressionable guy. Here's a guy they look to take over at the tight end position. But we still don't know about the quarterback situation in New Orleans. And one more here. This is going to be my surprise pick of all of them. One more here. A guy that I'm very excited to see. A guy that's not even in the NFL right now. I'm going to tell you to draft a rookie tight end. And yes, I'm going to tell you to draft a rookie tight end in Kyle Pitts out of Florida. This guy's a top 5 talent. He's not a top 10 talent. He could play in the slot. He could play out by the numbers. He can play the tight end position. He can run the seams. This is a guy who has excellent hands. He's very long. He's like a large receiver slash tall, lanky tight end that has some meat on his bones. So this is going to be an interesting situation. Now, does Philadelphia take him early on like they had Ertz and Goddard? Ertz is moving on. So this could be a 1-2 punch there. There's also talks of the Niners' interest in Kyle Pitts. You're like, the Niners, they have George Kittle. Yeah, they do, but look what happened when George Kittle went down. And if you can get 2 tight ends, and the first time we learned of this situation was through Bill Belichick in New England about 10, 15, 20 years ago probably now with Aaron Hernandez and Gronk. You get that 1-2 punch. You get that Ertz and Goddard. They pick each other up when one's hurt, when one's down. One's more of a red zone guy. One's normally more of a possession receiver at the tight end spot. These are guys that are used to productivity. They can also block as well. They need to be downfield blockers for the speedsters at wide receiver and support the running game. Kyle Pitts is a guy who can go on the field at tight end. He can cover all the bases, and he's still going to be productive as a rookie at the tight end position. Kyle Pitts is the deepest of sleepers, but I like him.
Yeah, you know, I think that there's a lot of stuff here, and you know, and Pitts just came up here. One of the guys writing in here talking about that. My sleepers at the tight end position for this upcoming season, because of the fact that I think, you know, with everything happening in Dallas, I think this guy gets underestimated, and he didn't have Dak there for him. And even when he did, we didn't see him enough. Dalton Schultz, I have him on my list in Dallas as a sleeper guy. Mo Alley Cox, who did some good things with a bunch of guys being in Indianapolis, where he's going to end up and what he can provide. I think he's a deep sleeper. Drew Sample in Cincinnati, with the passing of the guard that Tyler's left a little bit ago, and somebody's got to step up in Cincinnati, and Joe Burrow's going to need an emergency guy he can toss the ball to, so I have Drew Sample there. Dawson Knox, who came on a little bit late with Buffalo, and Donald Parham Jr., because of the Hunter Henry situation. I told y'all, because I watched the XFL, Donald Parham Jr. coming to, I think he came from the Dallas Renegades, and coming to the Los Angeles Chargers. He's a guy who's really talented, who just so happened to be behind Hunter Henry, so he didn't get a lot of looks. So I think the Schultz and the Coxes, the Samples, the Knox, and the Parhams are all guys to look at. And I think that Donald Parham might be a name that's not on anybody's list, except for mine, maybe yours now, that you can go out and grab and really see the capability that he is more than able to go out there, in my opinion. He's just been a guy who's been behind a guy who a lot of people know his name. So that's where we are. So with that being said, Mike and I will take a step aside for a fast break here inside of the Fantasy Football Power Hour, proudly presented by the Wildcat Sports Pub, 3680 Milton Avenue in Camillus, New York, giving you our fantasy sleepers for 2021. Mike and I will be with you right after this fast break, but not before you hear from these great partners in our community here in Central New York. From Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora, inside of the Cafe Kubal studios.
Cafe Kubal Mobile Cafe brings the cafe experience to you. We'll roll out to your neighborhood or office, ready to serve our locally crafted espresso bar to our loyal patrons. Inquire at cafekubal.com. Cafe Kubal, coffee for the soul.
Ma and Pa's Kettle Corn and Popcorn Factory, located on 201 7th North Street in Liverpool, is home to over 40 flavors with more than 200 flavors in their total wheelhouse. Sky's the limit for this sweet and savory Central New York company. Keep it local at your parties, fundraisers, wedding showers, baby showers, and more by calling 315-450-MA-PA. That's 315-450-6272 for popcorn bars with custom flavors and colors at your upcoming event. Make sure to visit them on 201 7th North Street in Liverpool, New York. And for more information, go to maandpassnacks.com. Ma and Pa's Kettle Corn and Popcorn Factory. How corny are you? The Millhouse Market, located on 3790 New York 13 in Pulaski, New York, is worth the drive every time. Make sure you download their app on the Google Play or Apple App Store today, and you will have their homemade breads, desserts, quinoa bowls, rice bowls, salads, brick oven pizzas, and sandwiches named after the families that helped to settle today's Pulaski, all at your fingertips, as well as contactless pay. You can tip right there on the app. And Tuesday through Sunday, once you order on the app, you can head right out to the Millhouse Market, grab your food, and go at their drive-up window. Their indoor bistro restaurant is open on the weekends, and throughout the week, you have their general store with local products from local companies. When it comes to supporting Central and Upstate New York, the definition of that is Millhouse Market, where we have someone who grew up in this community at the helm of the Millhouse Market, constantly creating and evolving everything that's on that menu and bringing us the best of the best and paying very close attention to detail, with the fact that they are looking to honor the families that built Pulaski by naming those sandwiches after them and giving back to the community with local products from local companies. So much good is being done at the Millhouse Market, and that's why I implore you to take that drive that is worth it every single time to 3790 New York 13 in Pulaski, New York. With that being stated, Mike Sofka and I are here inside of the Fantasy Football Power Hour, proudly presented by the Wildcat Sports Pub, 3680 Milton Avenue in Camillus, New York. You can find them there for indoor dining. You can also find them by getting them for curbside pickup, takeout, and delivery, calling 315-487-2222. That's 315-487-2222 for the Wildcat. And, of course, the Fantasy Football Power Hour here every Wednesday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Mr. Sofko, we have talked about quarterbacks, running backs, wide receiver, and tight end sleepers. What other notes do you want to make today when it comes to fantasy football?
Oh, it's something I talked about near the beginning with the offensive linemen. You know, 6 of the top 32 picks last year were offensive linemen, and more were taken in the second round. So, you know, look at the teams that have the better offensive lines. Look at the teams that have the younger offensive lines as well. But, you know, you take a look at situations around the league. How does the other players on that team affect the guy I'm thinking is going to be a sleeper? Does the moon, the stars, and the planets all line up the way you need them to? And this guy is a premier talent. This guy was big name in college. He did great at the combine. He went high in the draft. Are these guys that are set to blossom? You know, my wife and I did some tomato plants the other day, and you know, you look at a situation like that, and you're like, well, big deal. You're you're putting tomato plants in another pot. And well, it's the effort you're putting in. You're going to reap what you sow. So you have to make sure that there's going to be fertilizer. You have to make sure it's good. You know, the dirt, the soil is good. You have to look at the conditions around that plant. Is it going to get enough water? Is it going to get enough sunshine, but not too much sunshine? Are you setting that plant up for success? That's the same thing here. Well, we started with a good growth. You know, we started with the good seed. We started with the good plant, and then we moved them on to the bigger pots, and now we're watching them start to flourish. So this is the same thing with these football players. This is the same thing with teams around them and how they affect what you're forecasting they'll do. The only guys I give you are guys that I think are going to have that luck.
Yeah.
We've talked about luck before. It's labor under correct knowledge. Are we putting these guys in a position to flourish? And are you going to get those guys at a tremendous value late in your draft, and guys that people aren't even going to know who that cat is? A lot of people aren't going to know who a Cole Kmet is. A lot of people aren't even going to give some of these wide receivers that went in the first round the time of day. Jalen Reagor, yeah, he's all right. He's a fast guy. Henry Ruggs, yeah, he runs real fast. Brandon Ayuk, yeah. So take the deep dive. Take a look at last year's draft. Take a look at players that are changing teams. Take a look at what's the moving parts around these players, and that's how you evaluate a sleeper. So I look forward to talking about sleepers all year long, because these are things that are going to evolve. This isn't a concrete thing. This is something that's going to evolve as more moves are made. There's a lot of moving parts.
Yeah, and I think that, that's what I talked about going into it, is the fact that it's going to be constantly changing and evolving, that having this conversation at the beginning of March gives us the opportunity to get people prepared now for their August draft or July draft or September draft. But at the same time, it gives us the opportunity to continue to grow this list. And when teams move players around, as well as draft players like a Kyle Pitts, it shows us where guys are going to be, what the situation looks like, and if we start to add them in. Everything's fluid when it comes to fantasy football. That's why you got to listen every week. That's why we do it every week. So, Mr. Sofka of Hall of Fame FantasyFootball.com, bringing it with me every Wednesday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. Eastern Time inside of the Fantasy Football Power Hour, in the place to watch all the games, the Wildcat Sports Pub, and the place to be all year long, 3680 Milton Avenue in Camillus, New York. Mike, you and I have, over 10 years, had the opportunity to build a friendship, to build on fantasy football. We met through fantasy football. We met through sports broadcasting. What has the last decade taught you about fantasy football? What has it shown you about, the evolution that you've had as a fantasy football owner from the first time we met to right now?
Well, it's the thing I love most about fantasy football. It's a microcosm of life. Again, we talked about it before. You get what you put in. So if you want to win, you put more effort in. And, there's all sorts of avenues you can take. But the biggest things I've learned is to be flexible, to be open with what you're doing. You can't be too rigid in a plan or an attack. You can't go into a draft saying, I'm definitely taking a running back in the first round or whatever. You got to be able to be fluid. You got to move with the situation. And it's the same thing in life. You got to navigate through ups and downs. You got to navigate through positives and negatives. You got to work your way around them. Life is really nothing more than a series of failures, and it's just either how you respond to those failures or don't respond to those failures in some cases. It's an ever evolving thing. That the game has gone from definitely a running back league to definitely a wide receiver league, and I was kind of quick on the uptick for that minute. And I would always draft wide receivers earlier and running backs later, focusing on rookie running backs. And that's a generalization. That's not anything I went into any one draft thinking. It's what happened. You look at the proof positive. I go back and I look at previous year's teams and what I did and where I took players. I know it sounds kind of funny. Why would you look at the past? Well, if you don't know where you've been, how can you know where you're at? And you sure as heck don't know where you're going. So you got to evaluate where you're at, where these players are at, where those teams are at, and it's an ever-evolving cycle. I can come up with top 10s every week in all these positions and project stats for this and project that, but the players still need to play. A lot of people don't realize, the casual fan, that most NFL players, the game is the reward. The game is the cherry on top of the sundae. The work is done all summer. The work is done in the off season when they've got their off season. The work is done at the dinner table and through their diet and nutrition. So the game has definitely evolved in that direction. It's just like the NFL players. That's also why I love fantasy football. You got to put the work in if you want to come out on top.
Yeah, and that's with anything in life. You got to put the work in if you want the results. You get what you give. So if you put nothing in, you get nothing out. If you put everything in, then maybe you don't win the championship, but you give yourself the best opportunity to. So nobody likes somebody who is not giving that effort, and nobody wants to play in a league that's some people care and some people don't. So if you got fantasy football people that want to get in on it, they want to push for it, they want to do it, have them get in touch with me. dtstays@gmail.com. If they want to get in the leagues, they know where to go. That's dtstays@gmail.com. Mike, with all of that being said, you and I got a lot of great stuff coming up. We got a lot of great things every Wednesday, and it was great to have the opportunity to be around you in person as well for a little bit. So very happy that we got to do that, and I very much am thankful for the time that we get every week and the time that we get in general as friends as well.
Yes, sir. I look forward to the next time as well.
All right, that coming from Mike Sofka of Hall of Fame FantasyFootball.com and Winning Fantasy Football Facebook group, and make sure that you join us there on both of those. You can find us on Facebook, Winning Fantasy Football. All you have to do is type it into the Facebook search bar, and you will find it, and click on Join the Group. That is Winning Fantasy Football. And, of course, you can find Mike at Hall of Fame FantasyFootball.com. With that being stated, I want to thank you for tuning in to today's broadcast of Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora. A lot of great stuff that we've been able to do. You're tuning in Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. Eastern Time on Facebook.com/WakeUpCallDT. Or pardon me, Facebook.com/LiveNowDT. YouTube.com/WakeUpCallDT. MixLR.com/WakeUpCallDT. WakeUpCallDT.com. And then you're going to TuneIn, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, YouTube, iTunes, and Apple Podcasts, MixLR, and searching Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora to get the show. And, of course, our Central and Upstate New York partners helping to bring Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora to you: Carvel DeWitt, Cafe Kubal, Wildcat Sports Pub, Chick-fil-A Cicero, Canine Camp Dog Daycare, Avicoli's, Honda City of Liverpool, Pizza Man, Canine Campground Dog Boarding, Millhouse Market, and Ma and Pa's Kettle Corn and Popcorn Factory. Go to maandpazpopcorn.com and use the promo code DT20 in any one of the 50 states. That's DT20. Use it for in-store pickup. Use it for delivery to any one of the 50 states. If you're sending it off to someone, if you're ordering it for yourself, or if you're going in the store to get it, if you go online to maandpazpopcorn.com and use my personal code DT20, you're getting 20% off. So make sure that you do that today. With that being said, Alan Griffin, Buddy Boeheim, Marek Dolezaj, Mike Sofka, the Wildcat Sports Pub, thank you to all of you. This has been the sleeper pick as well as the Syracuse-centric show today. I thank you for tuning in. I thank you for being here. I wore the cutoff today in hopes that the sun will see it somewhere in the studio and warm us up here in Central and Upstate New York. And if you need to be warmed up at any time, you know where to go. Cafe Kubal, and get yourself your favorites today. God bless. No stress. Do your best. Facebook at Wake Up Call DT. Twitter at Call DT. Instagram at Wake Up Call _DT. And I'll see you all tonight from the Dome. Be well.